sometimes interpreters think they have more skills than they actually have, and communication breaks down. Up until now, we've kind of depended on them showing us their certificate, but there's not really a written down proof of that you are a skilled interpreter. In regards to the Title I, involving working places, interpreters are needed in a reasonable accommodation. That's the language that the law uses. But what does that mean? If an interpreter doesn't match the skills of the signer, then it doesn't matter. Communication breaks down again. So we could break down what reasonable accommodations means. For example, with an example, with people in wheelchairs, a reasonable accommodation would be having desks that are lower, so they're able to access them, having ramps that they can roll on. That's the example of reasonable accommodation. In the same way, interpreters would be considered reasonable accommodation for a deaf client. But who decides that? Who decides if you need an interpreter or not? It depends on the individual, if they decide to have an interpreter or not. You could use interpreters in staff meetings, in trainings, in evaluations, in any situation, but some people might want an interpreter and some people might not want one. It's just up to the individual. But what if you need an interpreter and your boss says that you can't have one? The only way that your boss can successfully not supply you with an interpreter would be for them to claim undue hardship, which means that if they supplied you with an interpreter, their business would fail. It would be too expensive for them, and they wouldn't be able to continue. The organization that's responsible of keeping track of undue hardship in Title I and II instances is the Department of Justice. They are required to keep track of businesses that are not supplying reasonable accommodations. Sometimes people get confused about and mix up Title I, II, and III. One involves the federal government and one involves access to public spaces. Occasionally you'll come across a problem because different organizations define interpreter as different things. And there's no one definition that they both hold.
We're just going to be discussing the first three because those are the ones that relate to interpreters.
One organization might require one type of certificate, while another might require a different kind, and there's no congruency between the two. And now, if you grew up on a farm and said that you knew that you were an interpreter, you don't even need a certificate to prove that you are one.
We're going to start working with interpreters that aren't familiar with ADA terms. They show up into a lecture or presentation and they say, I've never heard that word before. I'm really familiar with that term.
Sometimes it can be awkward to ask an interpreter for their certificate. It can be an uncomfortable situation. But if, for example, you were having a women's conference and you wanted a woman interpreter and you wanted a qualified one, you'd have to look around and you might not be able to find one. They might be busy or they might have to fly in from somewhere. It's hard to find qualified interpreters right when you need them.